Welcome to a fascinating exploration of the origins behind one of the most famous biblical novels of all time, Ben-Hur, A Tale of the Christ, and the surprising inspiration that led to its creation. In this video, we delve into the remarkable story of how a chance encounter on a train in 1871 between two men, General Lewis Wallace and Robert G. Ingersoll, set in motion the writing of this iconic novel. But there's more to the story than meets the eye as we uncover the incredible impact and legacy of Ben-Hur in this enlightening journey through history. So let's embark on a voyage of discovery and learn about the power of inspiration, dedication, and the enduring message of this timeless masterpiece.
Did you know that a famous agnostic inspired the writing of one of the most famous biblical novels of all time? One evening in September 1870, two men riding a train across Indiana struck up a conversation. Soon they began arguing about the inspiration of the Bible and the message of Jesus Christ. Robert G. Ingersoll, internationally famous as a challenger of Scripture's message, was trying to convince General Lewis Wallace that he didn't know what he was talking about. General Wallace, better known as Lou, the Indiana-born officer, fought through the whole of the Civil War. He participated in many lesser engagements and then took part in the bloody Battle of Shiloh. Later, he prepared the defenses for Cincinnati and was made commander of the 8th Army Corps. After hostilities ceased, he resumed his legal practice. But the lawyer and veteran of many battles was unable to cope with the brilliant Robert G. Ingersoll. He felt frustrated and defeated when he parted company with the noted agnostic, having failed to make any dent in the network of arguments with which Ingersoll defended himself from the challenge of faith. As a result, Lew Wallace went home determined to write a novel that would serve as a powerful argument for the divinity of Christ. Finished while he was serving as governor of the territory of New Mexico, it was entitled Ben-Hur, A Tale of the Christ, one of the most popular books of this century. It presents the message of the New Testament within a framework of vigorous action that involves believable characters. Ingersoll didn't live to realize it, but the story his argument inspired became widely read even in regions of the United States where all novels had previously been frowned upon as immoral. The book spread all over the world. It was translated into dozens of languages. And when Lew Wallace saw the set for the Broadway version of his book in 1900, he exclaimed, "My God, did I set all this in motion?" The chariot race, which was famous on the stage, was also the high point of the two motion pictures made from the book, one in 1927 and another in 1959. The latest one cost $15 million to produce and cleaned up at the box office. Within 8 years of the time it was published, Ben-Hur sold over 500,000 copies, unheard of in those days. It later sold 5 million copies, and is still available in a number of editions. But it wasn't just a case of a general hitting it lucky with his first book. Lew Wallace had always written. He began his first book, The Fair God, A Tale of Cortez and the Conquest of Mexico, and he was just 18 years of age. Later, as ambassador to Turkey, he wrote his last book, The Prince of India, at the age of 66. Well, it's quite a story. Not just Ben-Hur, but the way it happened to be written and what happened to it afterwards, all because of a heated argument on a train. Now, a moment for this message. Yes, the story Ben-Hur became one of the world's all-time bestsellers, but it doesn't hold a candle to the old book itself, from which it got its story. The Bible is still the #1 bestseller of all time. The truth is that it's happened to thousands of people in thousands of different situations. But the man who made the story famous, in this country at least, was Dr. Russell Herman Conwell, who lived from 1843 to 1925, and who, by telling the story from one end of the world to the other, raised $6 million, with which he founded Temple University in Philadelphia, and thus fulfilled his dream of building a university for poor but deserving young men. Dr. Conwell told the story Acres of Diamonds more than 6,000 times and attracted great audiences wherever he appeared. I'm sure you're as familiar with the story as I am, but it isn't the story that's so important in itself, and you're probably wondering if I'll ever get around to telling it. The important thing is that we apply the principle of the story to our own lives. The story is about a farmer who lived in Africa at the time diamonds were discovered there. When a visitor to his farm told him of the millions being made by men who were discovering diamond mines, he promptly sold his farm and left to search for diamonds himself. He wandered all over the continent, found no diamonds, and, as the story has it, finally penniless, in poor health, and despondent, threw himself into a river and drowned. Well, long before this, the man who had bought his farm found a large, unusual-looking stone in the creek bed which ran through the farm, and put it on his mantle as a curio. Enter here the same visitor who had told the original farmer about the diamond discoveries. He examined the stone and told the new owner that he had discovered one of the largest diamonds ever found, and that it was worth a king's ransom. To his surprise, the farmer told him the entire farm was covered with stones of that kind. And to make a long story short, if it isn't already too late, the farm, which the first farmer had sold so that he could go look for diamonds, turned out to be one of the richest diamond mines in the world. The point Dr. Conwell made was that the first farmer had owned acres of diamonds, but had made the mistake of not examining what he had before he ran off to something he hoped would prove to be better. He would then point out that each of us is like that first farmer. No matter where we live or what we do, we're surrounded by acres of diamonds if we'll simply look for them. Like the curious-appearing stones which covered the farm, they might not appear to be diamonds at first glance, but a little study, a deeper examination, and some polishing will usually reveal our opportunities and perhaps uncover our own hidden talents and abilities and genius for what they really are. We just haven't been looking for them. And now, in just a moment, I'll be back. Acres of Diamonds. It's a good story to tell the youngsters over the dinner table. It's the kind of story we all need to remember from time to time and look for our own. Thank you. Let me give you a little-known fact today that will increase your effectiveness in anything you do. It applies to doing a job, making more money, playing golf, cooking, raising children, teaching, anything at all. Now, while this has long been known by the most successful people of the world, it seems to have escaped the great majority. Whatever it is that you would like to do better, act as though you're a top-flight expert at it. And if you continue to play this part long enough, you will become an expert. When Arnold Palmer was 10 years old and on his way to becoming the world's greatest golfer of his time, he used to pretend that he was playing in national tournaments. He would even pretend to be the sports commentator announcing that the champion, Arnold Palmer, was now getting ready to tee off. You can take a great many strokes off your golf game simply by pretending you're playing in a great tournament, and that every time you swing or putt, you're surrounded by a large gallery and the television cameras. You'll find that you take more time, line up your shots better, and swing more like the pros and less like the duffers. If you can get a mental image of the person you would most like to become, begin now to act as that person would act in everything you do. Gradually, imperceptibly, you will actually become that person. It goes back to what the great German poet and philosopher Goethe once said. Before you can do something, you must first be something. Before you can do what you would most like to do, you must first become the person who can do it. A woman cooking dinner has only to act like a great chef to turn out a better meal. The student who begins to act like a top student will begin to get better grades. You can even look much better by simply acting like the person you would most like to look like and be like. The secret is to get and hold fast in your mind the mental image of the person you would most like to be. Then, in every situation, you act and talk as you feel that person would. You make the kind of decisions you think that person would. This is the way to constantly grow into a better, more effective person. You immediately begin to act with more confidence, and confidence is the first step to accomplishment. As your accomplishments begin to grow, which they most certainly will, real confidence slowly takes the place of the part you've been playing. Now, your life will not be transformed overnight. There'll be no sudden miracles, perhaps, but steadily, day by day, you'll grow into the image you hold in your mind. If you doubt this, try it for 30 days and watch what happens. You've got nothing to lose. The time is going to pass anyway. Why not put it to work, becoming the person you most want to become? It's the trick of the experts in every field. And now, just a moment for this message. Life is much too short to live fearfully, to settle for less than the best that's in us. We can become only what we expect of ourselves. We must act the part before it can become real. There's a marriage counselor who's had a lot of success in saving marriages on the brink of dissolution by suggesting that whenever one of the partners starts an argument, the other partner should make him or her laugh. Real trouble begins when laughter goes out of a marriage, he said. One husband says, "How in the world can I get her to laugh? She hasn't laughed in 3 years. And so we asked him, "What made her laugh 3 years ago?" And the husband thought for a moment. He said, "I think I fell on the ice in front of the house." then you've got the answer. Whenever she starts an argument, fall down and make her laugh. Well, this made them both laugh, of course, and the doctor went on to suggest that the husband think of anything that might be silly enough to get them both laughing. Stick celery in your ears, anything, he said. I remember many years ago we were rehearsing a dramatic radio series in Chicago, and the rehearsal had been going very badly. The script wasn't the best. A couple of the actors and actresses weren't happy with their parts. The director was getting edgy, and just as we were about to moodily try to do the dress rehearsal, since time was slipping away from us, one of the actors went out of the studio for a moment and returned suddenly with loud moans, staggering crazily, his eyes crossed, and with the ends of a pencil protruding from his ears. He had broken a long yellow pencil in half and had stuck the broken ends into his ears. From one ear, the end with the eraser stuck out, and from the other, the pointed end. Grisly as the sight was, it really made us start to laugh. It threw us, including the director, the engineers, the sound effects people, and the musicians, into fits of uncontrolled laughter until we were helpless with tears running down our face. From that point on, we were all right, and the show was one of the best we did that year. Laughter is wonderfully therapeutic. If your kids get into an argument, give them each a cloth or paper towel and put them on opposite sides of the same window with instructions to clean it. No matter how angry they may have been, just looking through the glass at each other, cleaning the window, will soon have them howling with laughter, the argument forgotten. There was a doctor who made it a practice to look for pictures in magazines and newspapers of people laughing hard. He cut them out and pasted them in a scrapbook. And when the book was full, he took it to the hospital and let the nurses pass it around the wards. You can't look at other people laughing without laughing yourself. And the effect on the patients and nurses was wonderful. Perhaps this is why good comedians are among the highest paid of the world's performers. People need to laugh. You can't feel worried or depressed when you're convulsed with laughter. It seems to have a beneficial effect on the human mind and body. We're the only creatures on earth who can laugh, and the only ones with enough problems to need to laugh regularly. And now, just a moment for this message. I remember reading about a husband who, when he had a nerve-wracking day at the office, would come home with his hat on backwards. If his wife had had a bad day, she'd wear her apron backwards. In either case, it would start them laughing and clear the air. Thank you. In a large Western company, the vice president in charge of sales retired. Everybody in the sales force assumed this juicy vacancy, and the vice presidency would go to the senior salesman. Let's call him Tom, who had been with the firm 25 years. And the one man most certain that the job would go to Tom was Tom himself. In fact, he'd been counting on that job for 5 years, since he had first realized his boss was planning on retiring. And for the past 2 years, Tom had been thinking about it. He'd told his wife and children, their friends and neighbors, and his friends in the sales force. The job meant a substantial raise in pay, and Tom and his wife had been planning things they could do with the extra income. For the past 3 months, they'd been poring over travel folders, planning a trip to the Orient. So when Tom was called into the president's office on the morning following the retirement party for the former vice president, he was wearing his best suit and a smile to match. What he had no way of knowing was that the company president was facing the kind of situation that makes company presidents worth every penny of their excellent incomes. He had an Armageddon on his hands. After he had winced at the cheerful good morning and dapper appearance of his senior salesman, he looked him straight in the eyes and said, "Tom, I have to tell you that the executive committee has awarded the position of vice president in charge of sales to Bill Smith." Well, there followed a vast, deep silence. They could have been in a diving bell at the bottom of the Marianas Trench. After 2 or 3 hoarse, croaking starts, Tom finally managed to protest. "But Bill has been with the company 5 years. I've been here 25. Well, enough of that. Facing the other men of the sales force and going home to face the family was an Armageddon or two for Tom. But it finally dawned on him in the weeks and months that followed that he had confused seniority with accomplishment. Tom didn't really have 25 years' experience with the company. He had 1 year's experience repeated 25 times. Bill Smith, in just 5 years, had far outdistanced Tom in growth, knowledge, and sales. While Tom was putting time in, Bill was putting in everything he had. And now, a young man, but with his head crammed with detailed information on every phase of the company's operation, with great plans for the future, with 5 years of outstanding sales behind him, Bill Smith found himself vice president in charge of sales. The executive committee had made a wise decision. It was interested in the growth of the company, not Tom's planned trip to the Orient. Sad story? Sad for whom? Tom could have had that job. He even had a 20-year head start. He just didn't plan for it. And now a moment for this message. As Albert Einstein discovered, time is relative. Its only value to us depends upon what we do while it's passing. Time means nothing at all to a stone or a fence post. It can mean a great deal to a human being. Thank you. Once upon a time, there evolved upon this planet an organism that was ill-suited for survival. It could not run fast enough to escape its enemies. If caught, its teeth and claws were small protection. It was too big to hide under a leaf and too weak to burrow deeply into the ground. To survive, it took refuge in caves where a fire at the entrance kept predators at bay. If the fire ran out of fuel, this creature could hurl rocks and thus drive all but the most determined enemies away. Its security was measured by the amount of firewood it could accumulate and the number of rocks it could gather and store in the cave against the terrors of the night. Now, you see, this was a very important sort of thing. All other creatures grew bigger teeth or learned to run faster. Alone among all the creatures on Earth, the one we're describing turned to things for its survival. This was, in the end, to make all the difference. After a while, this creature learned to cultivate some edible plants to supplement the food it could get by gathering and hunting. Growing food was at best uncertain and, in any event, depended on the seasons, which could not be controlled. So the creature began to store its surplus foods. His security against the vagaries of nature was measured by how much he could grow and how much he could store. His feeling for being at least partly in control of his destiny was based on the gathering of things. Well-being was measured quantitatively, the more the better. From the very beginning, he was motivated by fear of pain, fear of death, fear that there wouldn't be enough. In time, this creature's activities produced so much that it became more convenient to represent the accumulation of things by other things, smaller and easier to carry or to exchange. These symbols, although intrinsically of no value, assumed the same value as things, and men, or at least most men, became engaged in the acquisition and accumulation of the symbols of things. They did this even when they no longer had any need for them. The symbols were the surrogates for the rocks piled in the cave against the coming of the night. Think of this system as being reinforced over and over through hundreds of generations and thousands of years through social approval, ritualization, and acculturation. That there was something basically wrong with this way of life may be exemplified by the fact that those who refused to subscribe to the accumulation and storage of things, Christ, Muhammad, Buddha, became the founders of the world's great religions. Throughout all of this, nature was the enemy. The purpose of the life of this strange creature we've described was to conquer nature, tame the wilderness, make war on pests and vermin, control the rivers. Life was a battle against the elements. Only the fittest survived. Whole species of other life forms, plants, insects, reptiles, fish, amphibians, birds, and mammals were exterminated, most usually because they represented so-called threat against the accumulation of things. Now a moment. Man's feeling for being at least partly in control of his destiny was based on the gathering of things. Well-being was measured quantitatively. The more, the better. From the very beginning, he was motivated by fear. Thank you. Someone came up with an idea not long ago that intrigues me. He said, everything we do is either goal-achieving or tension-relieving. Now, that's something to think about, isn't it? Everything you do is either goal-achieving or tension-relieving. If a man's not too happy with his progress in the world, he should give a lot of thought to this idea. He should take a good long look at everything he does during his day, and as he approaches each act, he should ask himself, is this goal-achieving or tension-relieving? Now, we all need to relieve our tensions, but if we're doing too many things that are tension-relieving instead of goal-achieving, they're going to hold us back. Now, while I'm sure it couldn't be done, it would be interesting if a survey could be made to discover how much time is devoted each day of the work week by the so-called average man to acts which are strictly goal-achieving. We might all be amazed to discover what a small amount of time is actually spent in earning our livings and preparing for our futures. This would vary widely, of course, from industry to industry and from job to job. The busy doctor, for example, might spend 12 hours a day actually in the presence of his patients. And every minute with a patient would have to be called goal-achieving. Compare this with the time spent by, say, a salesman. How much of his day, and again, this would vary widely from industry to industry, is actually spent in goal-achieving acts. Driving from one call to another, even though he's not in the presence of a prospect or customer, would have to be under goal achieving. Stopping for a cup of coffee would be under tension relieving. So would chatting with people he can't sell or reading a magazine while he's waiting to see someone. Well, this is a pretty kind of vital balancing act that each of us should give some thought to. Going overboard in the tension relieving department could lead to some serious problems in the future. Now, Samuel Johnson once said, "Every man is, or hopes to be, an idler. But like everything else in the world, there is a time to be idle and a time not to be idle. If you want to be idle later, in comfort, it's a good idea to make sure you're not spending too much time in idleness now." At any rate, I think it can be said that the success of a person in any undertaking will hinge directly upon his making certain that the majority of his daily acts are goal-achieving, and that he relegates to a secondary position those acts which must be classified as tension-relieving. It might be worthwhile carrying a little piece of paper and making a note as we do things during the day. Is this tension-relieving or goal-achieving? Now, just a moment for this message. We must certainly carve out our own worlds in this life, and the shape and size of them will be determined in large part by the balance we achieve between tension-relieving and goal-achieving acts. Thank you.